Welcome to our guests. I'm Salim Ismail. I'm the Global Ambassador at Singularity University. This is our third or fourth in a series of programs that we call Which Way Next. Today we'll be interacting live with you around the world. We have several thousand people signed up for the webcast. To submit your questions, use the hashtag WhичWayNext or go to our page at singularityU.org. Singularity University, what we do here is we bring together the top thinkers in the world in the fastest moving technologies: AI, robotics, medicine, computing, energy, biotech, nanotech. And we think about how can you scale and leverage the inherent acceleration of these technologies to solve and address the biggest problems and the biggest opportunities in the world. Our guest today for this webcast is Dr. Peter Diamandis, who is a familiar face. We've had an abundance of Peter at SU. Peter is the co-founder and chairman of Singularity University, a serial entrepreneur who started over a dozen companies, has a degree in engineering from MIT, and a Harvard medical degree, a PhD, MD PhD from Harvard. Peter is one of the prime motivators behind the commercialization of space and is now an author, the best-selling author of the book Abundance that he's written with Steven Kotler. It's #1 on the Barnes & Noble list, #1 on Amazon. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list for several weeks now. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Salim. It's great to be here.
So let's get right into it. Why did you write this book?
I hold a couple of positions that gave me a unique perspective. So as chairman of Singularity University, as chairman and CEO of X Prize Foundation, I really have seen extraordinary progress in solving many of the world's grand challenges. And I've seen, what's more important, how teams, small teams, entrepreneurs, individuals have been able to literally do what only large companies and governments could do before. And as such, marry that with the realization that the world's largest problems are also the world's largest market opportunities. And it hit me that, frankly, I think we have the potential, not in centuries, but in the next 2 or 3 decades, the ability to really take on the world's big problems and solve them. That we're going to see entrepreneurs, startups, new technologies coming in to really attack water, food, energy, education, healthcare, all of these things. And that's, I was hearing so many people with so much doom and gloom that the economic crisis, problems around water wars and around energy scarcity. And I was saying, you guys aren't seeing the same world I am. That the world has been getting extraordinarily better, and the forces that have led us to this extraordinary planet we're living on today are only accelerating.
Why do you say that the world is getting better? Whenever we see the news, we're seeing tsunamis, we're seeing climate change, we're seeing water problems. How do you come to that?
So there's no question that we have a multitude of problems on this planet. And a lot of people, but we as humans pay far closer attention to the problems than we do the positive news. So if you look, for example, at this last 100 years, the last century, we have seen extraordinary progress in this last century. We've seen the human lifespan more than double. We've seen per capita income triple. We've seen, we're living in the most peaceful time ever in human history. And the forces that led us in that direction are really continuing in a very strong fashion.
So the book deals with what areas, what specific problems and opportunities do you see that where we can achieve abundance?
So in this book that Steven Kotler and I wrote, we define abundance and abundance pyramid. We say at the base of the pyramid are the fundamental things that we need for survival: food, water, and shelter. One level higher is energy, education, and information and communications. These are the things that you need once you have the basics to really start to improve your life. And then ultimately, at the top of the pyramid is healthcare and freedom, which is what you need to really live an enjoyable, long life. So in Abundance, for those who have read it and those who hopefully will be getting it, we show you not only where are these technologies going, but what are the huge business opportunities. I mean, the next billionaires are going to be made solving education, solving healthcare, solving the water and food issues. I mean, I share in this book a lot of the entrepreneurs, what they're doing, their stories, the technologies coming online, that if I were starting my next companies, that's where I would be focusing.
So let's pick a particular area, education. How do we get from where we are today to an abundance in education? Walk us through that.
Great. So today, in the majority of the world, I mean, I just was meeting with Prime Minister Gordon Brown from the UK earlier this week, talking about how the Millennium education goals haven't been met.
Right.
And we're talking about, can we create an X Prize to really get the 67 primary school students who are not in school, 9 million of which are in Nigeria, at least an educational capability. So the idea of trying to solve education in the same old way we've been doing it for the last couple of hundred years isn't going to fly. There's no way we can scale in that regard. We're not going to train enough teachers. We're not going to build enough classrooms. But education doesn't need to be the same old way. We have the chance right now, given the technologies that are available in artificial intelligence and cloud computing and mobile devices, to really reinvent education. So what might education be? Imagine, if you would, literally a video game that you can play on your cell phone. That you can, when you play this game, it is so much fun, it's so compelling that you want to play this game. And imagine if the game, while you're playing it, taught you what you need to know, whether it's language skills or mathematics skills or history or biology, whatever it might be. You know, ultimately, that is a way of reinventing education. We have gone from 2% cell phone penetration in Africa to 28% in 2009 to expected to be over 70% by end of next year, 2013. So 70% of these devices out there, these become the opportunity to become the educators. Add on that, what we saw this past year was the extraordinary success of Watson from IBM, IBM's supercomputer, playing the game of Jeopardy. Right. So I don't know how many of our viewers saw that competition, but what went on was IBM had built a supercomputer called Watson, named after the founder of IBM. And this supercomputer played against the top 2 all-time Jeopardy players, the one who had won the most money and the one who had won the most games. And looking at this competition, Watson, Jeopardy is not an easy game, right? It's a game of language nuance where you are asked, you're made a statement and you have to ask the question. But all the nuance in the game is what trips me up. I'm a terrible Jeopardy player. But Watson came in and literally blew away the human competition. Now think about this. This kind of a artificial intelligence that can speak and listen in natural language, understand your question, be able to access all the information they need, and then answer your question accurately, far better than the best human players. If that intelligence is resident on the cloud, when I say on the cloud, we've got the eBay, Apple, Google, Rackspace, all this cloud capability, huge amounts of computational capability, accessible to anyone with a cell phone. Imagine if you have a question where the AI can be your teacher, knows exactly your language skills, knows exactly your level of proficiency in math or reading or whatever, knows your favorite sport, knows your favorite actor or actress. And then when you ask a question, it answers you, taking you from where the level you are right now up by, if it's about algebra geometry, if you're a hockey fan, it's giving you, the puck comes at this angle and has to exit at this angle. That's the potential, where it's a personalized education available for free to anyone with an online device.
So that's the technology side, but there's some other drivers. You mentioned the techno-philanthropists. What are the major forces that will drive us collectively with the use of technology to a vision of abundance?
So we have a number of forces that Stephen and I talk about in the book, and these are the forces that are reinventing our planet, not over decades, but over the next few years, in fact. So exponential technologies, all right? The book lays out all the technologies that can make or break your industry, your job, your company. These are things like quantum computing, computational capability, networks, AI, robotics, nanomaterials, synthetic biology, all the fields that we teach here at Singularity University. And in fact, today we're starting a 7-day executive program. We have 75 executives from around the world who have paid a lot of money, $12,000, but still for an extraordinary experience. And we're filled between now and October here for our executive programs. Ultimately, we teach this, and I give an overview of all these exponential technologies in abundance. That's the first force. These are the tools that are allowing individuals and entrepreneurs to do what only governments and large corporations could do before.
So first, accelerating technologies.
That's number one. Number two is what I call the DIY innovator. There's a whole new generation of do-it-yourself innovators. These are entrepreneurs. They're individuals who literally say, I'm tired of waiting for the government to solve this, or I don't understand why this isn't being solved. And they, because of their passion and because of their commitment, are literally able to pull together a team of individuals to go and solve that problem. So you've got Burt Rutan, who won the first Ansari X Prize, giving up on NASA being the way to get private people to space, and building a private spaceship with 30 engineers literally in his garage in the Mojave Desert and going to space. Or Dean Kamen, who I talk about on my TED Talk and talk about in the book, who created a new device called Slingshot, which is able to literally solve the water crisis globally. And we can come back to that. So that's the second force, the DIY innovator. The third force is the techno-philanthropist. So today we have more billionaires and centimillionaires being made than ever before in history. And I have the pleasure of having some extraordinary people on my board of trustees at the X Prize, from Dean Kamen and Larry Page and James Cameron and Ratan Tata. And I've seen these extraordinary individuals really say, I'm going to solve this problem. You know, one of my trustees, Naveen Jain, for example, said, I'm going to focus on education. And he's taking on education. He's also taking on going to the moon, but that's another story. Ultimately, these techno-philanthropists have the ability to focus on solving these grand challenges, and instead of building buildings to their names to leave their legacy, folks like Bill Gates is saying, I'm going to wipe out malaria. That's going to be my legacy. Or I'm going to reinvent healthcare or education or water or energy. And it's an extraordinary time where individuals can take that on and solve grand challenges.
So we have accelerating technologies, and the democratization of that is allowing small teams to do things that people couldn't do before, driven by large people with a lot of capital that want to address problems. What's the fourth?
Well, the fourth force reinventing our world and bringing in this is something everybody should know about, because it's going to be huge opportunities for entrepreneurs, huge opportunities for people who want to change the world. I call it the rising billion. What people don't recognize is that in 2010, there were 2 billion people connected to the internet. By 2020, just 8 years from now, that's going from 2 billion to 5 billion people. 3 billion new minds are plugging into the internet. These are people who've never been heard from before. What do they want? What are they going to consume? What are they going to invent? What are they going to solve? If you do the math, 3 billion new people coming online represent tens of trillions of dollars of purchasing power. If I were an entrepreneur or running a business, I would be figuring out, what am I going to sell them? What am I going to provide, services going to provide to them? And even the other way around, what are they going to produce and create that I can package and sell to the rest of the world? 3 billion new minds is an extraordinary power for innovation. I think we're going to have the most innovative time ever in human history over this next decade.
I know that you're a new father, and I've heard you singing to your twins in doubling patterns, 2, 4, 8, 16 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. We've talked about education. Talk about water and how you think we can get there with water, because these are systemic issues, and critics will say that it's great to have technology, it's great to have capital, but you run up against regulatory issues, you run up against local problems, you run up against big companies with vested interests in oil markets. How do you overcome the societal issues to get these solutions into market?
So, thank you, Salim. I mean, one of the things that, as our global ambassador at SU, and you travel around the world and have brought in extraordinary partnerships that bring the very best graduate students to the university, you know that all of these problems are interlinked, right? If you solve energy, you solve water. If you solve water, you solve healthcare. I mean, do you know that half the disease on this planet is from dirty water? Get clean water into the hands of individuals, and you've knocked out half the disease burden of planet Earth. That's extraordinary. So one of the examples, I'll go back to my friend Dean Kamen. Dean has built a device called Slingshot. It's about the size of a dorm room refrigerator, not very large, about 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. and it's operated on just 100 watts of energy, less energy than a hairdryer. This device is able to generate 1,000 liters of clean drinking water per day. When I say clean drinking water, it has two hoses. One hose goes into anything wet, salt water, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean. It goes into the latrine, into arsenic-infected water, anything that's got water content. Out the other hose comes water so pure that it meets the medical standards for injectable water. It can generate 1,000 liters a day at less than 2 cents a liter. You know, it costs more to move a liter of water than 2 cents a liter. Now, here's the interesting part. He's built these devices. He's built about a dozen of them. He's tested them. What he allowed me to announce at the TED conference when I gave one of the opening speeches was that he has just had a series of successful meetings with the chairman of Coca-Cola, Mr. Kent, and what Coca-Cola has agreed to is to build a few hundred of these devices and to test them in a number of countries around the world. And if this large-scale field trial works, Coca-Cola will distribute these in 208 countries where they operate and provide literally billions of people clean water.
So as you hit clean water that knocks out half of the infectious diseases, that has a knock-on effect to healthcare, and then you start eradicating these interlinked issues at the base, and then you rise up the levels.
Absolutely. So water gives us healthcare. I mean, energy is another area that I think is going to be extraordinary in this next decade. You know, we are living in a world which, just like our education system is 200 years old, to a large degree, so is our power energy system. You know, we're still living in a system where we produce the energy at one location and distribute it. And the electrons that are powering people's computers that are watching this presentation right now were created a few seconds ago in your local power plant, traveled through the power lines to light up your computer or light up the Wi-Fi networks that you're hearing this on. If you didn't use those electrons, they're gone. So we're moving towards a new system, a system where energy is created locally and stored locally, the same way that information is created locally and stored locally on your hard drive, on your cell phone, wherever it might be. A faculty member that we know well and love, Bob Metcalf, calls it the internet, the energy internet, and we're heading that direction. But probably the thing that's most exciting about the energy world is solar. Now, there's lots of different ways to create energy. There's wind, there's natural gas, there's nuclear, and I discussed these, Steve and I discussed these. Steven's a real expert in energy in abundance, and we talk about all the different methodologies and where the business opportunities are as well. But the real potential is clearly for me in solar. We are living on a planet that is bathed in 5,000 times more solar energy than the human race uses in a year. In fact, as much energy as we use today as the entire 7 billion people on this planet falls on the Earth's surface in 88 minutes. So what's interesting and what gives me hope is that the rate of solar cell production worldwide is growing exponentially, and the price is dropping exponentially. Last year, the cost of solar dropped 50%. In India, where your family hails from, the cost of solar produced electricity is 8.8 rupees per kilowatt hour. The cost of generating a kilowatt hour from diesel is 17 rupees. So solar today is half the cost of diesel generated electricity. MIT just released a study in February that showed by 2020 the cost of solar in the United States, or at least I should say in the sunny parts of the US, which is still a very significant part, will be 6 cents a kilowatt hour compared to a national average from our current coal and natural gas plants of 15 cents a kilowatt hour. So we're moving in that direction. But here's the beautiful thing. Once you're able to meet all of the human needs from solar, if it really is growing exponentially, the next year or 2 years later, you've got twice as much energy, then 4 times, and 8 times. We have 5,000 times as much energy as we produce, lots of headroom. So what happens when energy is so cheap and ubiquitous that it's literally free and you have as much of it as you need? Then we start having fun.
Now, the naysayers and critics would say that, okay, great, the capability is growing, but our manufacturing of solar panels and photovoltaics is still a very linear approach. How do you address that?
Well, I address it by saying we have a number of technologies that we talk about here at Singularity University. We will over these next 7 days in the executive program of new material science, the whole realm of nanomaterials coming online. There's a whole realm of synthetic biology and biotechnology where we literally are going to be able to reinvent how we produce materials. One of my board members at XPRIZE Foundation is Craig Venter. And Craig holds two amazing distinctions. One, he's the first person to sequence a human genome, his own, in 2001. Cost him $100 million. He did it in 9 months. Effectively beat, or at least tied, the US government to the punch. And then in 2010, he created the first artificial life form, the first synthetic life form, a 1 million base pair string of DNA that he put into a cell and booted it up. So he's focused on creating a new generation of algae. Now, if you think about it, algae is one way of solar energy. You're basically taking sunlight, these algae life forms are converting it to a hydrocarbon that you can then produce as a diesel or a fuel, whatever it might be. The algae pulls the CO2 out, you then burn it, put it back, and it's a closed cycle. But the algae he's looking to generate can generate 10,000 gallons per acre per year, which means we could fuel every car in the United States, 250 million of them, from these kinds of algae in a fraction of the landmass of the state of Nevada, for example.
I think the stat for ethanol is you get about 16 gallons per acre of corn.
Right, 16 gallons, exactly. This is 10,000 compared to 16.
Okay, so let's move on to a couple of other things. First of all, I'd love to ask you, where did the book talk about aluminum? Because the book is inspired by that design.
Thank you. I would like to, and in fact, the name was inspired by a friend here, Neil Jacobstein, and in fact, you were part of my inspiration for opening the book with the aluminum story, so thank you. And doing that, actually, my wife Kristen created the design for this. So there's a great story that I think people need to understand, thanks, which talks about how to rethink. You see, in your life, you can think about scarcity or abundance, and it changes your view on your business, on your entrepreneurship, on your world, and how you live your life. Because realizing that most everything can be turned from scarcity to abundance with the right framework changes the way you look at opportunities. So there's a great story that I opened the book with, which is the story of Napoleon. Napoleon III in the 1840s invited the King of Siam over for dinner. And he ended up basically feeding all of his troops using silver utensils. Napoleon himself ate using gold utensils, which was the custom of the day. But the King of Siam was fed with aluminum utensils, because in the 1840s, aluminum was the most precious metal on the planet. You see, even though the Earth is made up of aluminum, 8.3% of the Earth's weight is aluminum, the atoms of aluminum. All the aluminum on Earth is bound with oxygen and silicates in what we call bauxite. So there's no pure aluminum. You can't go into the soil any place and just mine pure aluminum. All of it is bound with other elements. And it was so difficult to extract the aluminum out of the bauxite that it was worth more than gold and platinum. In fact, that's the reason that the tip of the Washington Monument got a capstone of aluminum, since it was built in the same time. And then this technology came along called electrolysis. And that technology made the extraction of aluminum so cheap that, we throw it away. We think of it as a throwaway material, aluminum cans, aluminum foil. So that has colored my view on everything we think of scarce today. The real opportunities for entrepreneurs, the next billionaires are going to be made, the next people who save much of the grand challenges on this planet. It's what we talk about here at Singularity University. It's what the companies that come out of SU, it's why executives from around the planet fly here to change their mindset about how do I, in a world where things are scarce, scarcity of great education, scarcity of great healthcare, scarcity of water, energy, whatever it might be, how do I flip it and think about how to make it abundant?
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we operate out of this scarcity model? You read that in the news, all you hear about is big issues, big problems. Why is it that this problem exists, or this perception exists?
So, great question, and I have a whole chapter that Stephen and I wrote in this book on cognitive biases. See, the human brain people don't realize and think about the fact that our minds, our brain, the way we think, evolved during a period of human existence, hundreds of millions of years ago, to think in a local and linear and scarce fashion. So we lived and evolved during scarcity. Food, whatever we wanted, was scarce. And unless you hoarded those things, you did not survive. So we actually think about and view things in a scarce way. We also grew up in a period of time where things were local and linear. Things were local in that the only things that affected you were in the day's walk. Things that happened on the other side of the planet 100,000 years ago, you never knew about it. Things were linear in that the life of your parents, your grandparents, didn't change from generation to generation. But today we're living in a world that is abundant and global and exponential. And so you have to literally you have to change the way you view problems to see the opportunities.
Let's take a couple of questions from Twitter. Open Sky asked the question, Exponential Technologies has thrived in nascent blue ocean industries. Will it impact industries owned by big old companies like energy, food, etc.?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Thank you to Open Skies for asking that. I mean, ultimately, what we're seeing today is extraordinary. We are seeing the death of many 100-year-old billion-dollar industries. You think about publishing. You think about the film industry. You think about even the music industry. And the problem goes back to the local linear thinking. As humans, a lot of the CEOs and the board members in these companies think linearly. But they don't think exponentially. But exponential technologies sneak up on you and can blow you away. So if I were to take 30 linear steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I end up 30 meters away. And all of us can pretty much project where 30 meters are. You can point at it pretty accurately because we think in linear terms. But if I were to take 30 exponential steps, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and I said where we're going to end up, most people, we're sitting here in Mountain View, California at the NASA Ames facility right next to Google. Most people would say, oh, maybe I'm in London. You're going to end up 1 billion meters away. You're going to have orbited the planet 26 times in 30 exponential steps. And our inability to know that, understand that intuitively, is what literally disrupts entire companies and industries. So it's hopping on exponential technologies is what allows new companies to come out of no place. So you and I both met the early founders of Siri, which powers the iPhone 4S. They've been here at SU. A lot of the high-tech companies in the Silicon Valley come to Singularity University to meet our executives and to be part of the faculty. And one of the things that impressed me when I met them was when they started Siri, that was then bought by Apple, the technology to fulfill what they wanted to accomplish didn't exist. But they projected where would the technology be in 3 and 4 years, and they built their system to intercept it. So that's what entrepreneurs can do. They're willing to take huge risks, willing to fail. And that's where large companies won't do. And that's why we're living during the period of time of the greatest exponential technology and wealth creation ever. So, YouTube, started by Chad Hurley, goes from startup to being sold to Google for $1.6 billion in 18 months. Groupon goes from 0 to $6 billion in 2 years. Yes, I think the old style companies are in big trouble.
So what happens, Instagram just sold for $1 billion to Facebook with 12 people in the company.
Extraordinary.
In an age where we can create such value with such few people, what's the future of employment? A lot of people have concerns that we're entering a world where we have massive and critical and systemic unemployment.
So this is a great question, and Stephen and I talk about it in one of the appendices of Abundance, that job creation is something we need to think about. A couple of points. Number one, as you well know, we are constantly reinventing the jobs on this planet. Go back 100, 150 years ago, and 2/3 of Americans were farmers. Now it's under 2%. So did we just destroy those jobs? No, we created new jobs like, clothing designer on Second Life, or website designers. It didn't exist. You couldn't even conceive of them. So what's going to be happening is we're going to be teaming with artificial intelligence as humans. We're going to be teaming with robotics, with other forms, and we're going to be creating new capabilities that we have. The second thing is, ultimately, jobs are a recent creation. The whole idea of a job is a recent creation. go back, thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, and you lived your life and you survived. A lot of people get their value out of their job, position, and title. In the future, if your water, food, energy, education, healthcare, and so forth is provided for you, if it's so cheap that these things go to zero, you're going to be spending your time not in a traditional job. You're going to be spending your time perhaps as an artist or an explorer or as a thinker or as a game player. So we're going to be reinventing a lot of society in the next 20 or 30 years, and people looking for new opportunities, for new entrepreneurial startups. I would be thinking about these things. Where people have more excess time, where will they spend it?
Okay. Another question coming from Twitter. From Aram. What are some of the roadblocks that sustainable innovators face when bringing ideas to scale? What are some of the issues that people run into? Because you've interacted with a lot of small teams trying to bring ideas to market. You mentioned Dean Kamen. What are some of the roadblocks that everybody faces?
So let me parse it into two parts. Small teams who are trying to do really extraordinary breakthrough thinking. It requires taking huge risks. I'm fond of saying the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. And what happens is large companies and governments are really bad at putting crazy ideas forward. And what happens is they end up saying, it has a high probability of failure. But of course, if you really want to try something as a breakthrough idea, you have to be willing to fail. And that's what makes Silicon Valley so special, that people are willing to have serial failures. That failing is a badge of honor, that I will employ somebody who's had some failures in their lineage because they've learned from it. So ultimately, one of the most difficult things is learning how not to try and pre-guess the solution. One of our faculty members coming on here, brought on by Vivek Wadhwa, is Eric Ries, who wrote Lean Startup. And Eric's going to be part of our entrepreneurship educational track, an extraordinary book and an extraordinary faculty member. Very proud to have part of the SU faculty. And it's really about how do you iterate rapidly. So getting out of the sense that I know exactly the product and being happy with I know the area roughly where I want to go, and I'm going to create a minimal product, test it, see what the reaction is, and then build the next one, then build the next one, rapid iteration. I think that's what our exponential ecosystem allows us to do, to try something, try it in the marketplace. If it fails, what did I learn? Try the next one. Instead of spending years, and if you can fail off and fail early, you're not scared to fail because, okay, I only spent 5 weeks and $5,000, big deal. Try the next one, the next one, the next one.
You're always asking the faculty, when do they expect certain things to happen?
Yeah.
Let me put you on the spot.
Go for it.
When do you think we get to an abundance of water, energy, education?
So I think that we have, and I put it in the book, a lot of guesses of where Stephen and I sort of project things. I think that we have the potential, for example, simply with Dean Kamen's technology, to have water abundance for a significant part of this planet within a decade, which is extraordinary, right? I mean, look at how the cell phone just literally grew exponentially. Imagine one of these water devices in every village being able to provide 1,000 liters a day. That would be transformative. Literally 10,000 of these devices would provide billions of people with clean water.
So water within a decade?
Weather could be within a decade, which would change the game in healthcare as well. Education, I know that at XPRIZE, I've made a commitment to design and fund a number of education XPRIZes in this year. It's something that we want to do to reinvent how we educate, because it's crazy that we're using the same old educational system as we did 100 years ago. So, all of these things are within the next 20 years. If I stretched it in the next 25 years. But that's the timeline we're on to be able to create abundance.
So what do you think happens in this next 20 years? It'll be a very exciting role. What's the role of governments and regulatory frameworks in this environment? Because they're always lagging behind.
Yeah.
And we're fond here at SU thinking about, concerning about how does a regulatory framework of any kind keep pace as technology is accelerating away from us? How will they cope in an age of abundance?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Salim. And at the executive programs, we also have a lot of senior executives coming from the U.S. government and governments around the world to talk to us. The challenge is that the rate of breakthrough is so high that governments can't keep up with it. So how do you regulate when, for example, I'll give you one example, the iPhone is a device that we can talk to, it's information abundance and all of that. We have just launched an X Prize called the $10 million Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize. I was on stage at the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, with Paul Jacobs, the CEO of Qualcomm, and the chairman of the Qualcomm Foundation. Qualcomm Foundation has funded a $10 million competition for the first team who can build a device that's a consumer user device that I can cough on, I can do a transdermal blood analysis, and I can talk to, and this device has to be able to diagnose you better than a board-certified doctor. So I don't know how much time we have left on this broadcast, but we have literally, the question then becomes, if the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize is being won on an iPhone, does your iPhone become regulated by the FDA?
Right.
And if it's regulated by the FDA, do you all of a sudden have a situation where this kind of technology is deployed in Africa before it's deployed in the United States because it isn't regulated here? So
how are governments responding to this? Are they trying to cope, or do you see everybody just bypassing governments completely?
Well, number one, we're working at X Prize with the White House. They've been very supportive of some of the X Prizes we launched, the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize being one of them, the Wendy Schmidt oil cleanup competition being another. So governments want these problems solved. And if they can use incentive prizes working with X Prize and other organizations, that's fantastic. But I really, I know, for example, in the first X Prize we had, the Ansari X Prize, that competition was not winnable at the time we launched the competition because the rules and regulations allowing for private spaceflight didn't exist. I actually had to go and meet with Marion Blake, the FAA administrator, and say, Marion, the X Prize is going to be won in Mexico or Europe because it's illegal to fly a private individual into space, let alone bring them back. You can fly rockets one way. So literally that competition changed the rules and regulations. So one of the biggest challenges we're going to have is creating an environment in which regulations can keep up with the exponential rate of change.
I love your story from Zero G. How long did it take you to get?
Oh, God. So I walk into, those of you who don't know Zero G, it's a company I started with Byron Lichtenberg and Ray Cronise, and we do parabolic flights. Now, NASA had been doing parabolic flights for 40 years before. It's the only way to create weightlessness on Earth. So in May of '93, I walk into the FAA and say, I want to do this commercially. I want to take 36 people in the back of the airplane, in a big, long, hollow 727, take off, and then have the airplane go up a 45 degree, push over the top, and everybody can float around. And they're like, you want to do what? And it took us 11 years to get approval from the FAA. I'm very, very stubborn. And ultimately, 11 years later, we've now flown 12,000 people. Anyone who haven't done it, it's an amazing experience. The website is gozerog.com. It's $5,000. It's not cheap, but it's the experience of a lifetime to go. We flew Stephen Hawking into Zero G, the world's expert in gravity, into Zero G. That was fun.
11 years to solve that problem. So certainly we're going to have to shorten those timescales down.
Well, what's going to happen is that we're now living in a world where borders are porous. So in the Bush administration, when we started looking at stem cell research, all the best researchers just left the US and the technology went to China and South Korea and other parts of the world. So if government regulations can't keep up with the technology leaves. It doesn't stay. And that's a challenge, right? So, you know, the internet became such an explosion of capability in the United States, there was no regulation stopping anybody. It was created by the entrepreneurs within 50 kilometers of where we're sitting right now who invented everything. So, you know, when synthetic biology is coming online, and nanomaterials, and AI, and robotics, and all the things we talk about in the next 7 days here at SU, that are, I mean, I'm very clear to anybody listening, the next multi-hundred-billion-dollar industries are going to be what we talk about in this next week, in artificial intelligence, and robotics, and synthetic biology, and Internet of Everything. They're going to be companies that we have never conceived of, or heard of, or thought of, that are going to be created out of these exponential technologies. They're going to create the next generation of multi-billionaires. And regulations are going to either have to be changed or recreated, or they're going to go elsewhere.
So on that vein, what are the countries, you have a unique global perspective looking at innovators all around the world. What are the countries where you see people operating with the right type of energy and the right type of thinking?
Well, I mean, we're seeing a lot of countries out of South America that, you know, you as well have gone to. Out of Chile has got a great vision. Out of Mexico, I would be surprised if the same way that Africa skipped the entire wireline generation and went to wireless communications, if healthcare and education skipped all of the generations we currently have in Africa and went to where abundant healthcare and education, you know, is available 20 years from now in Africa, but some of the stuff, you know, is threatening unions or large groups here in the United States and are therefore put the kibosh on. I mean, cardiologists spent an entire, you know, 5-10 years saying, I don't want to have AI reading EKGs. But even though they were much better at reading EKGs. So, I mean, we're looking at an X Prize right now that, you know, instead of having radiologists read X-rays or reading retinal scans, other things, an AI can probably do it better.
Okay. There's a question over Twitter from Scott Breton. Peter, I'm a visual artist. What are your thoughts on the role that the arts and culture generally play in creating a better world and a world of abundance?
Great question. So, you know, we're living in a day and age, Scott, where the vision of where we want to go is the most important thing. Creating the target, the vision of where you want to see the world is so critical, because the technologies then exist to allow you to get there. But people need to be inspired. So, for example, one of the greatest artists, if you would, and storytellers was a guy named Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. I happen to know his son, Rod Roddenberry, who came to our last SU executive program. And Gene Roddenberry created this beautiful vision of the future where the tricorder exists, right? The tricorder is that device that Bones and McCoy, Dr. McCoy and Spock used to analyze you. And that vision inspired me and Paul Jacobs to create the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize, which we now have 165 teams around the world competing in that $10 million competition. So what's the vision that you want to create? Set that, visualize it in the movies, in the arts, in the storytelling, and then, you know, allow entrepreneurs to use the exponential technologies we speak about here at SU to go and create that.
Do you see this whole generation of technology that we're living in today was inspired a great deal from people like Arthur C. Clarke, who you knew, and the science fiction writers like Gene Roddenberry and others? Do you see that vein continuing, or do you see another group of artists or visualizers or YouTube-type activities taking that role? So
I think what's going to be happening is we have an extraordinary capability for people in virtual worlds to create visions of the future, right? One of our friends, Philip Rosedale, who created Second Life, even my conversations with Eric Hirschberg, the CEO of Activision, you know, all of these game worlds that are being created are creating visions of what could be. And they set a set of expectations that I want my world to be like this, not the war and death and dying ones, but the other ones. And then why not? Why can't we create that capability? So, you know, again, those of you who are reading Abundance, or those of you who hopefully will get the book and read it, will see where this technology is going, and what is, what are these powerful tools that allow you to invent any future you want.
Okay. Another question over Twitter from Bruno Conde. How do we drive a world managed by business needs when trying to achieve these grand challenges? You've touched a little bit on the role of markets and businesses. Speak a little bit more about how business can drive it and address these areas.
Well, ultimately, business is about making money. And if I were creating a business, I'd be interested in going into fundamental markets that have huge opportunities. And there's a perfect alignment here. The world's biggest problems, water, food, energy, healthcare, education, are the world's biggest business opportunities. I mean, do the math. Even for the poorest people on the planet who spend 1/3 of their income, let's say they're making $2 a day, but they spend 60 cents a day buying water, times 3 billion people, 365 days a year, that's tens of trillions of dollars, or these trillions of dollars. Huge opportunities. The same thing in energy, healthcare, education. So business has the opportunity to do good and to do well. And so what we teach here at Singularity University, what the graduate students do during the summer, and what the executives have the opportunity to invest in is what we call 10 to the 9th plus companies, right? So we spend time teaching all these students about all these exponentially growing technologies and then saying, what are the companies you can create, the products, the services, the companies that can positively touch the lives of 1 billion people? And we call these 10 to the 9th plus companies. And there have been about 24 of them come out of SU, about a dozen are doing reasonably very well, a few are doing extraordinarily well, funded by Kleiner Perkins, won TechCrunch Disrupt, won the Harvard Business School Startup of the Year Award. So ultimately, these are chances to build products or companies that change the life of billions of people. And you and I, all of us know dozens of entrepreneurs who have touched billions of people's lives. That's what's possible today with Exponential Technologies.
Speak a little bit more about some of the technologies that we'll be hearing about over the next week here at Singularity University at this executive program.
Sure. So we're going to have lectures about the future of robotics. If you think about robots that are coming online in this next decade are going to start to displace menial labor. You're going to have, we have one of our faculty members is one of the founders and executives for Intuitive Surgical, which is changing the future of medical surgery by having robots do the surgery far more accurately, far more cheaply, consistently. And then you've got folks like at Willow Garage who are creating the PR2 robot, which have the capability of what a human does. So imagine that in the future, instead of jobs going from the US to India or China, they stay here because the cost of electricity is the same there as it is here, and the robots are going to be doing the work. Scary for people who are worried about jobs, but we have to upwardly mobile the people who are doing the menial labor, augmented by AI and other technologies to do more capable things. So that's just two of the examples of the technology we're talking about.
Okay, and in all of this, I mean, we note that major breakthroughs come when you cross disparate and different areas together. We mix those together here. What is the future? We've got a great question here from Daryl Adams. Do technology patents promote or impede the progress of exponential technology?
Interesting. It depends if the patent is acted on or not. If the patent is acted on, that's great, but people who are buying up patents and then just holding on to them, really that technology is somewhat moribund. But, you know, honestly, coming up with the idea is a fraction of the battle. As an entrepreneur, I mean, you ran Yahoo's Brick House, Yahoo's incubator, and you know, as I do, the idea is a fraction of it. It's actually taking that idea, capitalizing it, taking it to market. So, you know, I think patents are critically important for large-scale investment. People want to be able to, because the rate of innovation is so rapid, people want to know they have something to invest in. But it's a double-edged sword.
Okay. So going back to Abundance, the book, what do you see the next step being? How do you take this concept, this very optimistic and very important meme, and make sure it spreads around? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, one of my reasons for writing this book is to change people's mindset. So my goal is to have enough people read the book so that they realize and spread it, because your mindset about the future controls what you do. If you think the world is going to, going to be destroyed, is going to be going into a world of scarcity, that everything, are you really going to be starting a family, starting a new business, or thinking positive about the future? No. But if you believe that we are living into a world of abundance, then you're going to be invested in the opportunities that are coming out of that. We're living in a world right now where people can stop complaining about problems and start solving them. And I give tremendous examples of the whole world of DIY innovators. Talk about Chris Anderson, the editor of Wired magazine, and DIY drones, what he created there. So literally in the book are examples of how you can get involved, how you can create, gather with other people to take on and solve big problems, which are ultimately where you can create wealth, leave a legacy, and also create a world you want to live in.
And do you see that these problems, are you seeing the shift in people's mindsets as you speak around the world? Is that starting to change?
Yeah, I mean, we've been on the New York Times bestseller list now for 6 weeks, and I do a lot of keynote addresses to audiences of CEOs, hedge fund managers, venture capitalists around the world, and they're coming afterwards and saying, thank you. I read your book. It has changed my entire model of where I'm investing, what kind of companies I'm looking at, and that's really fulfilling. And entrepreneurs who said, you've inspired me to go and start a company. And that's, if anything, hope is one of the key things that people will get out of reading Abundance. I also say that in Abundance, I do tell the story of the founding of SU. I tell the story about the founding of XPRIZE and how SU and XPRIZE are really about solving the world's grand challenges. So if you're interested in Singularity University or what XPRIZE can do, this will give you an inside view, and then you'll decide whether this is the right place for you to come. And I highly recommend it to any executive. This will change, this next 7 days, I mean, we have a sellout crowd here of extraordinary executives, will change the way you view competition, view opportunity, and really where you should be investing your capital.
Okay. In terms of the real hurdles that you see coming out, what are the biggest problems that face some of these areas like education, healthcare? Great that we have these movements like techno-philanthropists and these driving forces. What are the obstacles that you see in some of these areas?
The biggest obstacle, frankly, is the human mind. We are stuck in the way we think. We don't like change. And we're also stuck in a very protectionist attitude. So that what happens is real change requires disruption. So you might have seen the documentary Waiting for Superman, which talks about the educational system. And I've had some incredible teachers in my life who have changed my life. But you also have an entire infrastructure of the existing school system and teachers unions and so forth who don't want change. So if you're going to change healthcare and have tricorders make it abundant, you're going to change the entire healthcare industry. Physicians who spend a huge amount of money going to medical school, or the educational system. So we're talking about disrupting entire industries, which create huge opportunity and will bring down the cost and make it abundantly available. But there's going to be turbulence along the way.
Well, Peter, thank you for an abundance of your time and your energy in building Singularity University, and best of luck with XPRIZE. The book is called Abundance. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. It's available on Amazon right now. Join us for our next series in this series of webcasts. We'll be doing these every few weeks on an ongoing basis. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been Singularity University. Which way next?